a documentary chronicle of pioneering African American lawyers in civil rights era Tampa Bay.
Oral history. A discussion of the life and times of civil rights era pioneering African American lawyers in Tampa Bay, Florida. Why talk about the journey? Pioneering African American lawyers are retiring and are reflecting on their legacies. It is an opportune time to capture their stories in their own words. What is an oral history? 1. A recording containing information about the past obtained from in-depth interviews concerning personal experiences, recollections, and reflections. Also, the study of such information. 2. A written work based on oral history. Merriam-Webster.com. The importance of oral history. A quote: "Oral history shows you that there is more than one perspective and that there are multiple stories in history. History is usually done from the perspective of your old, white, rich, and male. It's more diverse than that. There are other stories that need to be shared and perspectives that are just as valuable that need to be in the history books." Adrian Kane, Assistant Director of the Institute for Oral History at Baylor University. The African American Oral Tradition. Lift every voice. The Florida Bar recently profiled James Weldon Johnson, most famous for penning the words to the affectionately nicknamed Negro National Anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Johnson was a prominent lawyer, writer, and educator. He was the first African American lawyer admitted to the Florida Bar after Reconstruction. This oral history is an answer to his call to, quote, "Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us." One famous lawyer who inspired many, Justice Thurgood Marshall, rose to fame in his work for civil rights all over the South on behalf of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. He was a source of inspiration for many young people who would later become pioneering lawyers. Mr. Marshall Goes to Florida. Marshall inspired Delano Stewart, Arthenia L. Joyner, and Donald R. Odom, and countless others to become lawyers. Marshall conducted many trials in Florida in his fight for civil rights under the law. His most talked about and dangerous case took place right in Tampa Bay's backyard in Groveland. A quote: "In the post-war decade, Florida would prove to be a state with a boundless capacity for racial inhumanity, even by measure of the rest of the South. Devil in the Grove, Thurgood Marshall, The Groveland Boys, and The Dawn of a New America by Gilbert King." The case of the Groveland Boys made national news at the time, had a significant impact upon the NAACP's goals for future litigation, and is now the subject of an award-winning book. It took place in Florida, a state that somehow escaped the bad reputation attributed to Mississippi, Georgia, or Louisiana, even though it had a higher per capita lynching rate. From the Black History Month review of The Devil in the Grove by Gilbert King, Rhapsody in Books weblog. Delano Stewart, Esquire, Hillsborough County, Florida. Mr. Stewart was the first African American elected to the board of directors of the Hillsborough County Bar Association and member of the Rough Riders Civic Club. Mr. Stewart is a founding member of Tampa's predominantly African American George Edgecombe Bar Association and the Tampa Organization of Black Affairs. Mr. Stewart mentored pioneers Frank H. White, second African American judge in Pinellas County history, George Edgecombe, Hillsborough County's first African American assistant county solicitor, assistant state attorney, and judge, among others. Milestones along the way for Delano Stewart. In 1936, he was born in Hillsborough County, Florida. In 1948, he meets Thurgood Marshall, who would become the first African American Supreme Court justice. At the time, Marshall was visiting Tampa as an NAACP attorney, helping African American teachers campaign for equal pay. In 1965, just months after graduating from Howard University School of Law in Washington, D.C., he became the first African American board member for the Hillsborough County Young Democrats. In 1966, he became the first African American assistant public defender in Hillsborough County. In 1970, he hired Martin Lawyer III and created Florida's first racially integrated law firm. In 2015, Mr. Stewart retired from the practice of law. Video clip, Delano Stewart.
If you develop the following four things, CI, character, integrity, courage, and intelligence, you won't fail. And you have to utilize that in life, remembering that any day that you have and you have the ability to do something, it is not you, it's the talents that God gave you. And what I am afraid of, and I've seen it happen so many times, the climb of a mountain is steep, long, and rigorous. You fall off it in a second. You cannot cheat life. You think you may cheat life. And I'll make an example out of somebody who I aided and was his good friend and helped him. And he lost a second district court of appeal judgeship. He got his license taken. And I was on the committee. I was chairman of the committee. And I had to do strategic thinking because on that 9-person committee that I was chairman, I was the only black person. There were 3 vacancies. And they were whispering, we can send one up, the other 2. Well, what they were trying to do, there were 3 blacks, and they were trying to narrow them down. I called Lawton Childs, who was the governor at that time, and I said, I need a telegram saying you would like all 9 names at one time. I stopped by the canned cool store that morning. I got a brand new white cap, never been worn. So the first vote was to narrow the committee to 9. We had 10 people, and we narrowed it to the 9, and the 3 blacks were still in. So he said, what are we going to do now? I would like to move that we send 3 up. That motion is out of order. Whipped out the telegram from Lawton and presented it. So that's gone. So I said, how are we going to do this? I said, we got the 9 names. And we were scrambling up, but reached and got the white hat and put it on. Each one of you put a name in, and we shook them up, and then we took them out. 1, 2, 3. The Honorable Peggy Quince was in 1. 1, 2, 3. There was a black lawyer from, and so that left the only one, and Tom Stringer. So I got the opportunity to send 9 names, a black person being in every one of them. I had a lot of accolades heaped on me. How did you do that deal? All this political maneuver. Well, critical thinking and prayer. Because I couldn't make one be in each one of the things. It was a gamble. But once I got them down, I trusted God enough to believe that in that white, brand new Cancun hat that had never been worn, that a black would be in each one of them, and one was. And I have been praised about my maneuvering, but I know in the essence of reality, but for the Lord on my side, I couldn't have done it that way.
A quote. My philosophy teacher once said, "You will die. There is no alternative. You do not control when that will be, but you can control how you live." That sums up life. If you pursue things you believe in, death is inconsequential. Donald Stewart. Mr. Stewart is working on a book tentatively titled The Negro Lawyer, documenting his times, tribulations, and triumphs during his life and career. Parthenia L. Joyner, Esquire, Polk County, Florida. Miss Joyner attended Florida A&M University, receiving her bachelor's and Juris Doctor degree. She was twice arrested for protesting as part of the Civil Rights Movement. Miss Joyner received the National Black Caucus of State Legislators Lifetime Achievement Award and the President's Award from Florida A&M University. She was inducted into the Hillsborough Women's Hall of Fame in 2014. Miss Joyner is the longest practicing African-American woman lawyer in the history of Florida. Milestones along the way for Arthenia L. Joyner. In 1943, she was born in Lakeland, Florida. In 1969, she became a legal assistant to State Representative Joe Lang Kershaw, became a founding partner in the law firm of Stewart, Joyner, and Jordan Holmes, and the first African-American female lawyer practicing in Polk and Hillsborough counties. In 1984, she became president of the National Bar Association, the historically African-American National Lawyer Association. She was arrested for her role in a protest against apartheid during her tenure. In 1991, she was appointed to the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority by Governor Lawton Childs, on which she served as the first African-American board member. In 1995, she was appointed by President Bill Clinton to serve as the American representative at the United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. In 2006, she became a state senator for Florida's 18th district. Elected as Senate floor leader for the Democrats, she would leave the state legislature in 2016 due to term limits. Video clip, Arthenia L. Joyner.
You know, as I reflect back on my childhood, I remember when I was a kid, and I was born in Lakeland, Florida. And my father owned a business, and it was situated near our home. And I remember one day he came in and he said, "Close the door and pull the blinds. The Klan's gonna march." And I was either 4 or 5, maybe 3, but it was so distinct. So my mom shut the door and pulled the shades. We didn't have blinds, we had shades. And she pulled the shades down and he said, "The Klan is gonna march and I want everything closed down in here." And so it happened. And then the Klan marched and we peeped slightly out the window and saw all these men with robes and white hoods on, white robes and hoods over their faces. So this was my first encounter with vivid displays of intimidation, because as a young black girl, I had, been told, and I lived in a segregated society then, and I'd been told that these men who wore these white robes and white hoods were dangerous and that we should, not be anywhere near where they were. So it was somewhat of a frightening experience, but the day passed and they moved on. But that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the realization of the introduction of me to what it was like to be afraid of people who hid their faces.
A quote, "I tell younger people, your word is your bond, and to let your word speak for you. You don't have to follow the crowd to be successful, but you do have to stand up for what you believe in, even if you have to stand alone." Arthenia L. Joyner. Ms. Joyner continues to keep a busy schedule and intends to continue her work as an attorney within her community and to serve in private life with the same passion and dedication that she committed to public service. Donald R. Odom, Esquire, Pinellas County, Florida. Mr. Odom was the first African-American lawyer to work in the legal departments of several government offices in his hometown of the city of St. Petersburg. Mr. Odom was a 2-term president of the George Edgecombe Bar Association and the Virgil Hawkins, Florida chapter of the National Bar Association. Mr. Odom is a lifelong member of the NAACP and was active in its work in the city of St. Petersburg, including being the chair of the Legal Redress Committee. Milestones along the way for Donald R. Odom. In 1950, he was born in St. Petersburg, Florida. Mr. Odom would go on to live out his formative years in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. In 1974, he enrolled in the University of Florida College of Law as one of very few African-American students. He completed his studies in under 3 years. Between 1974 and 1985, he would become the first African-American assistant city attorney with the City of St. Petersburg's City Attorney's Office and first African-American assistant district counsel with the District 5 office of the Florida Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services. Between 1985 and 2005, he would serve as a board member for the St. Petersburg Human Relations Board and co-chair of the St. Petersburg Community Alliance and the City of St. Petersburg Charter Review Committee, which played an instrumental role in redistricting to increase fairness and equity in city council elections. In 2005, after several successful years working at the Hillsborough County Attorney's Office in several positions including acting county attorney, he retired from the practice of law. Video clip, Donald R. Odom.
Well, growing up in Florida, you would think that, I did a lot of swimming growing up. And I did swim, but during those days, black people were limited in where they could swim. There was one public swimming pool in St. Petersburg that I could use, and it was called Jenny Hall Pool. And there's a history with that is there were no places for black people to swim in St. Petersburg back then. So this white woman whose name was Jenny Hall actually donated the money to build a swimming pool on the south side of St. Petersburg for black people to swim. And the swimming pool still bears her name. There was one place that I can recall that we could swim down on the bay, and it was called the South Mole, I think. And I have subsequently learned that that was the swimming outlet that was closest to where the city dumped the sewage in those days, which of course growing up I knew nothing about that. As a child growing up in Jacksonville, I lived 10 blocks from the Atlantic Ocean, but we were not allowed to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. So in order to swim, we had to drive over to Fernandina in American Beach. I can barely remember American Beach, but it was, from what I understand, it was quite a place. They had black-owned hotels and nightclubs and restaurants, a whole strip, and people would come, well-to-do black people would come from all over the country and in vacation there. I understand that a sizable number of properties there are still owned by black families that have been in the families for generations. So I can recall driving back from after a day at the beach. As I recall, it was because you had to take a ferry, and it was probably like an hour and a half drive, And I can recall driving back late at night, with my family, and if somebody had to go to the bathroom, of course you had to pull to the side of the road because you couldn't use like the public facilities. So it was just kind of one of those indignities that you had to get through, in those days when you were black.
A quote, "You should enter the profession because you are committed to it and you desire to help others. If you are committed to the profession, you will probably be good at it and the financial regards will eventually come." Donald R. Odom. Mr. Odom is thoroughly enjoying retirement. He frequently travels, plays golf, and stays active in the community and spends time with his family. Justice Peggy A. Quince, retired. Quince was born in Norfolk, Virginia. She was the first African-American female Supreme Court justice to be appointed to the Florida Supreme Court. Before serving on the Supreme Court, she worked in legal aid at the Attorney General's Office's Criminal Division and was an appellate judge with Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeal. Among Justice Quince's accomplishments are the 2003 William Reese Smith, Jr. Public Service Award, the 2006 American Bar Association's Margaret Brent Women Lawyers of Achievement Award, and the 2017 William Reese Smith, Jr. Leadership Academy's Lifetime Achievement Award. Milestones along the way for Justice Peggy A. Quince. Born on January 3, 1948, in Norfolk, Virginia, Peggy Quince was the daughter of hard-working parents who instilled in her a strong work ethic and a passion for education. Her mother passed, and she and her siblings were raised by a single father. She attended public schools and initially began her path toward medicine before switching to law. In 1972, Quince enrolled in the prestigious Catholic University of America's Columbus School of Law in Washington, D.C. During her time there, she excelled academically, and in 1975, she earned her Juris Doctor degree, marking the first major milestone in her legal career. Shortly after graduating from law school, Quince moved to Florida, where she was admitted to the Florida bar in 1975. She then secured her first job as a legal aid attorney at Bay Area Legal Services, where she provided representation to low-income clients in civil matters, sharpening her skills as an advocate for the underprivileged. In 1980, Justice Quince joined the Attorney General's office in the criminal division, where she served for 13 years. Her commitment and hard work led to her appointment as an appellate judge on Florida's Second District Court of Appeal in 1993, making her the first Black female appellate judge in the state. On December 8, 1998, Justice Quince joined the Florida Supreme Court, making her the first Black woman to serve. She championed issues such as juvenile justice reform, access to justice, and racial and gender equality. She was Chief Justice from 2008 to 2010 and retired from the bench in 2019 after more than 2 decades of dedicated service. A video.
Because often things would happen that would make you feel bad. I guess that's as good a word as any. Like I remember my brother and I both had skin problems. And so we had to go to the doctor's office quite often. And when we went to the doctor's office, we would be put in the waiting room for the coloreds, and there was a waiting room for the whites. And despite our appointment, often the whites who came after us were seen by the doctor before we were seen. I remember going to a neighbor's house. Now, we lived in a rural area in Chesapeake, Virginia, for most of my years growing up. I was sent to a neighbor's house, and neighbors were not that close in rural areas, but the closest neighbor was a white family. I went to the door, knocked on the door, went to borrow a cup of sugar. A little boy answered the door, and I heard his mother say in the background, "Who is it?" And the little boy said, "I don't know, it's too little." And so those kinds of incidents, you see a fountain, water fountain, and it says whites only. All of those kind of incidents could really work on your own sense of self-worth. The teachers that I encountered from my elementary through my high school days really taught me to believe in myself and not listen to all the rhetoric, all the names that you were called. And I don't think I would have gotten that in an integrated situation. It is my belief that, teachers may not have cared about those kinds of incidents, those kinds of things that Black students had to put up with, that Black people in general, not just Black students, but Black people in general had to put up with those kind of indignities. Going to the back door of the restaurant, because you could certainly not sit in the restaurant and eat. So those kinds of things really can be very disturbing and work on one's psyche. But our teachers taught us that we were somebody long before that slogan, became popular. And they told us we could do it.
A quote, "And you prepare yourself by studying, by making good grades, so that whatever you want to do, you can move up to the next level, because everyone is going to be looking at how well you've done at the level before that." I think that was great advice. And when I finished school, I went back and talked to those teachers and thanked them for all the good advice and assistance that they gave me. Justice Peggy A. Quince retired. Justice Quince thoroughly enjoys retirement. She frequently travels and stays active in the legal profession through speaking engagements and bar associations. She is also active in the community by serving on several foundations. This is just the beginning. Many more stories like these are waiting to be told. There is a wealth of experience and knowledge in the African American legal community in Tampa Bay. The people behind the Journey to Esquire. This project is driven by passionate people who believe in the power of oral history. Director-Producer Jocelyn J. Hardrick, Esquire. A quote, "This project is a labor of love. I get to work with great friends and explore the stories of people I admire while contributing to the rich collection of oral history in my community." Ms. Hardrick has her bachelor's in African and African American Studies from Fordham University. She received her Juris Doctor from the Florida State University College of Law. Ms. Hardrick is admitted to the Florida Bar, the Middle District of Florida, the Southern District of Florida, and the United States Supreme Court. She is the founder of Diversity Access Pipeline, a nonprofit program dedicated to promoting diversity, creating access, and feeding the pipeline of talented, diverse attorneys and professionals. Consultant Dr. Peter Christian Eigner. Dr. Eigner strives to make knowledge available to the widest possible audience, going far beyond the academic community while still bringing that work directly into local classrooms and learning spaces. He is currently completing his first book, a biography of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, under a contract with Simon & Schuster. Dr. Eigner is Deputy Director of the Gotham Center for New York City History. He is founder and managing editor of Gotham, a blog for scholars of New York City history. He was a dissertation fellow with the Leon Levy Biography Center and a podcast host for New Books in History and Urban Study. Videographer Ricky Roberts with Ricky Roberts Photography. Where do we go from here? There are many more Journey to Esquire stories to be told. Will you join us on our quest to gather and share? Contact us for more information. Address: P.O. Box 173044, Tampa, Florida 33672. Phone number 813-906-6361. Email journeytoesquire@gmail.com.